fantasy football almost daily. With your hosts, Paul Charchian, Christian Peterson, Mat Harrison, and Brian Johnson.
Welcome to Week 11. It is time for our waiver wire recommendations. I am Paul Charchian, Christian Peterson, Mat Harrison with you to help you find the right guys off the waiver wire.
Yeah. It's almost like you half forgot my name there right at the beginning.
I'm still not 100% healthy.
I know.
So I'm not as bad, but the gerbil's off that little wheel, that generates whatever power my brain needs. Gerbil dead.
Oh,
dead.
no.
Yeah, his carcass is just, like...
So the wheel is still spinning.
The wheel's spinning a little bit, but
that's
right.
Okay.
And he's going upside down. He's doing loop-to-loops and stuff. Yeah,
that's fun.
Let's dive in at the quarterback position where Colin Kaepernick has been shockingly competent.
Mm-hmm. Shockingly pedestrian.
That's one of our classic phrases, but he's actually been a little better than pedestrian just because of the rushing numbers. And if you're Chip Kelly, you're coaching what is going to be your final 7 games of your NFL career. Why not run Colin Kaepernick all the time, right? What do you care? So he's averaging 57 rushing yards per game, which means in addition to his pedestrian passing, you get Todd Gurley as a running back every time you start Colin Kaepernick.
Insert Todd Gurley owners going, oh.
Exactly.
Another one.
It's not that far off a true, unfortunately. He's good for he's only had 1 rushing touchdown, I think, in 4 starts. So you're getting, which really does mean he's Todd Gurley, a touchdown every 4 games and 57 rushing yards. So Patriots this week, but most of the rest of Kaepernick's schedule after that, pretty favorable until the very, very bitter end. So in deeper quarterback leagues, or even I see a scenario, you're in a playoff game against a number 1 seed and you need something special to happen. Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
Maybe he runs in a couple for you or runs for 80 yards and a touchdown. So
I think that's the angle. It's a high risk, high reward type of play. But if you're desperate to try to sneak into the playoffs here, or like you said, you sneak into the playoffs as a low seed and you need some points, then sure.
The only other quarterback worth mentioning, I think, is Sam Bradford. Under Pat Shurmur, new offensive coordinator, he's averaging 40 passes a game, which is up from the 33 he had been throwing under Norv Turner, and that's allowed him to put up 2 of his 3 highest yardage games of the year. And so I don't think that that's a coincidence. The catch, of course, is they are now down their top 4 tackles.
You got another tackle.
And so
they've completely given up on the run, which means
that much
everybody's going to be, pass rushing and backing off. So
that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah.
Schedule's difficult this week, but after that they get After that, they do have a handful of opportunities to start Bradford in a deeper league: Lions, Colts, Packers, Bears. Let's turn our attention to the running backs, where it's a little more interesting. C.J. Prosise largely owned at this point.
I think so.
But I was surprised to see, even in my fantasy league, which is generally deeper league, savvier owners, he's still available in 23% of leagues.
Okay.
So that means in ESPN and Yahoo, he's probably available in like half.
And he's an all-in type proposition if he's available on your waiver wire.
It's got to be in a PPR league, though, I think. Like, if you're not in a PPR league, I don't know if I like it at all with Thomas Rawls coming back. And even though Kristen Michael sucked lately, he's still
working.
there.
I agree. And as we discussed on Saturday's show, the schedule for the Seahawks
really
might
bad.
be the hardest remaining run schedule in the NFL.
Yeah.
And the offensive line played last week by far their best game, and it wasn't even close. And I don't know that they've now just, with 1 game of data, I don't know if we can just say, wow, this is going to be just like last year, and this offensive line has just put it all together now.
Maybe due to the Patriots' front 7 being exceptionally bad, too. They don't have any pass rush at all this year.
Well, that doesn't necessarily affect Prosise as a runner who rolled up 153 total yards. Yeah. But I think there's still a lot of danger here, and I don't advocate the all push in all of the rest of my chips. I still have a 40% blind bidding recommendation, so I mean, I'd be aggressive, but I can't tell you that C.J. Prosise is going to be a recommended starter if he's going to get a starter's grade for the rest of the games or even half of the games the rest of the way. Probably, but probably half. I don't know. I think there's still a lot of moving
it's
parts
more
here.
of are you really going to get a better opportunity than this? Or, there's only a few weeks left before your playoffs start. If you really need a running back, are you gonna hold on to your funds and hope I don't know, something else happens to a starter that you can then go all in on a guy? So it just feels like a guy who clearly is going to be getting some touches here, and maybe the tough run schedule actually plays to his favor. Maybe it's Rawls and Michael who are going to be bottled up by these tough run-stopping defenses, and the only way that they're going to be able to move the ball is through the air to Pro-Size.
And maybe that's your better point is PPR leagues. You do push a lot of chips in.
Yeah.
In non-PPR,
Sure.
you don't because no matter what happens with Rawls and Michael, Pro-Size is still going to get receptions.
Right.
Let's talk about Kenneth Dixon. So, it's taken me half of a year to get here. But a guy that I was advocating for in the preseason is finally, I think, clearly delineated himself as the better running back for the Ravens. They gave Terrence West 21 damn carries in that Browns game, and he was able to run for 3.1 yards per carry. That's it. Meanwhile, Dixon goes off for 6.5 yards per carry, chips in another 5 receptions for 42 yards, and since for the last 5 games, Terrence West is averaging just 2.7 yards per carry. So I just think there should be a changing the guard here.
It sure seems obvious that there should be. I think the problem is in the NFL, coaches sometimes don't do
Correct.
the obvious move. So it feels like Terrence West is still going to have a role here, at least a little bit.
He will have a role for sure.
Well, and Kenneth Dixon's finally healthy. He
too.
was knocked out for so long, and maybe he wasn't 100% when he came back. He's finally looking like a healthy, spry running back.
Don't get me wrong, I agree. I just think sometimes everybody else can see things that NFL head coaches don't.
And it
for,
does
for
happen.
at least
It works
a little
that
while.
way sometimes.
Yeah. And keep in mind, the Ravens just lost 2 offensive linemen.
Yes, that's a huge factor on this. Their offensive line, they've got 10 days off here. They've got to get healthy, and they have to block better because there was not a lot anybody could have done to run behind this line. Also, the schedule is pretty tough. I've got a blind bidding recommendation on Ken Dixon at 20%, which is me showing a lot of restraint. You know how I feel about him, but it's worries about the offensive line, it's worries about the schedule, and it's worries about Terrence West still looming, especially as a goal line back. James Starks inexplicably got a bunch of work last week, and they just shelved Ty Montgomery, despite the fact that he's by any measure a bigger threat as a running back, both for anything other than a between the tackles running assignment. Montgomery's better. He's better wide. He's better receiver. But James Stark's got most.
Well,
of the work.
they're out of that game right from the first quarter. So
I think
Well,
that's
all the
why
more
that's more concerning to me
Yes.
is that despite the fact that they were out of it and had no reason to run the ball, it was Starks in there and not Montgomery. You would have assumed that was prime territory for Montgomery just to play the whole game at running back.
maybe they gave up and they just were like, "Hey, he's still not quite
Get him
well
back
from
in.
his illness.
Knock off the rest a little bit.
Give him the rest. This game's over. Let's get out of Tennessee."
2 guys that are on IR that could get pulled off in coming weeks that you might want to just spend a buck on now. Charles Sims and Amir Abdullah. Reports out of Detroit say that they're going to pull back linebacker John Bostic, not Abdullah. So I think he's I think he's less likely to be available to come back to the team. Sims, to me, very likely because they've had so many running backs go down.
Yeah,
they need Charles Sims
and they
back.
get the Saints twice in your fantasy playoffs,
Yes,
week
they do.
14 and 16 against the Saints.
Let's talk. Let's go to the wide receiver position. I got a couple of guys I want to touch on. Tyreek Hill, the Chiefs' water bug with just lightning moves, video game style, moves that make you go, wow, he's the only guy in that whole offense really that can turn something short into something long.
If he's a water bug with lightning moves, is he a lightning bug?
I think by definition he is. But water and lightning, I mean, bad combo, right? I mean,
mix.
somebody's going to die.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to tackle
Somebody's
him,
gonna
get
get
electrocuted,
electrocuted and
then die on the field.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill's gonna kill someone.
Last week he had 13 touches, which was a lot because Jeremy Maclin was out. Macklin's probably going to come back this week. But he'd been trending the right way with 6 and 5 touches, targets rather. He's been getting 2-ish runs every game, and he's a really good punt returner who could chip in a periodic touchdown that way too.
He's basically Tavon Austin from last year.
He is Tavon Austin.
Maybe not quite to that extent. He doesn't get as many rushing attempts, but yeah.
So Tyreek Hill, I think he's an intriguing play. I'm not breaking the bank on him. I have a 15% blind bidding estimate for him. Cameron Meredith now with Alshon Jeffery out becomes, whether Jay Cutler likes it or not, becomes the go-to guy in that offense. I mean, Cutler had zero interest in him.
Yeah.
None. And now with Jeffrey out, he's got no choice, right? I mean,
Don't you think Zach Miller just
Zach's
picks up
gonna
a
be
ton of this
a
too?
lot of work for him for sure. Zach Miller.
And maybe Kevin White when he returns out, if he returns off of IR too. Kevin White, I believe, is week 12 or week 13 eligible. Right. You never know.
Maybe he does come back. Agree with you on Miller, and I would have talked about him here, but I went and checked his ownership percentage. He's at 92%. So Miller's not an option in most leagues, but I agree that Miller's a prime beneficiary here. By the way, the Bears and Meredith, they have the Giants, which is a pretty tough matchup this week, but then the next 3 weeks during Jeffrey's suspension, Tennessee, San Francisco, Detroit.
Nice.
All three very bottom tier secondaries.
Although Cameron Meredith probably gets Darius Slay at that point.
He might.
So
he might. So that Lions matchup might not be as good.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll mention, Tajay Sharp showing signs of life, but don't go out of your way to get him if you're in a deep league. Just, he's starting the last couple of games. He's been more involved.
I would check on Michael Floyd, too. He was dropped in a couple of my leagues when it looked like he was behind both J.J. Nelson and John Brown.
Well,
and then,
he was behind them.
Yeah, and then Nelson, he fumbled one and had one bounce off his hands for an interception,
Correct.
and he was basically benched, and Floyd came in and had his first
awesome game.
First 100-yard game of the year. It looked like the Floyd that we saw for most of last year.
Laid out coming home this week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, homecoming of sorts this week against the Vikings.
And the Vikings maybe without Xavier Rhodes, which definitely shuffles the deck for there. And maybe without Captain Munderland. They might be missing 2 of their 3 starting cornerbacks.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who he's shown, star-level potential at times throughout his career. Mm-hmm. So if he's available in your league, definitely take advantage.
Cameron Brate has now scored in 3 straight games. And basically, since Vincent Jackson got hurt and went on IR, Cameron Brate's numbers have just gone bonkers.
Yeah.
I think he's very solid. They do get a tough matchup with the Chiefs this week. They've only given up 1 tight end touchdown all year. They just shut down Greg Olsen last week.
They've been awesome against tight ends.
They have been awesome against tight ends.
Yeah.
So that's going to be. I don't know that. I think it ends here for the 3-game scoring streak for Cameron Brate ends here. But that's not to say that he wouldn't be better in the future. The only tight end handcuff in the league, Martellus Bennett. An intriguing pickup. It looks like Gronk's going to miss this week's game, and it's the 49ers. When Gronk missed the time early, Bennett was really good. When after Gronk got that devastating hit on Sunday night, from that point forward, Bennett was a beast.
Yep.
So I think if for sure
it might only be a 1-week rental.
Yes, it may only be a 1-week rental.
For that 1 week,
yes.
It could be worth.
But if you own Gronk, and especially as we're starting to head towards the playoffs and these bye weeks are behind us, I think you're pushing a lot of chips on Bennett and you get that handcuff.
Just in case.
Yep.
It's a good point on handcuffs just in general, I guess specifically running backs. Are we to the point now with just, probably 3 weeks left until your fantasy playoffs where you're better off getting your handcuff to your top running back than you are trying to hang on to a guy who may or may not, pan out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're at that stage now. If you've got, if you're sitting on 8 wins right now, it's probably time to start thinking about some playoff planning. And, the bye weeks are largely behind us at this stage.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think that makes sense. One other tight end, and I think we're done. Zach Ertz is by the way, is there anybody who hasn't been burned on Zach Ertz over the last 3 years?
Why are we mentioning him again?
He always does this where he tantalizes us with a couple of good games and then just disappears, or all of a sudden Brent Selleck turns. It's Brent Selleck's turn in the rotation.
He's the guy who's been on like 5 rosters already this year.
He's had
on and off the waiver wire.
He's had solid back-to-back games. He's been targeted 15 times, catching 14 of them the last 2 weeks. 152 total yards. He's got Seattle this week, which is unfortunate, and that's another really good tight end defense. But if you're in a pinch, you could consider Zach Ertz. Lastly, if you need a kicker, Sebastian Janikowski coming off the bye week available.
Actually, Adam Vinatieri came off of his bye week too.
Yeah, if somebody dropped him. That's
and Matt Prater also.
Yeah.
I believe Detroit was on their bye this week too.
Get this though on Seabass, he has a lower field goal accuracy percentage than Blair Walsh. He's missed more.
They spent a first-round pick on him like 20 years ago, so they're not cutting him.
They're not going to cut Seabass, I don't think. But I'd rather have Prater and I'd rather have Vinatieri.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right, there you go. Thanks for joining us for our free agent recommendations. Tomorrow, it's Wednesday, the Panic Room. That means we will attempt to dethrone our current reigning champion.
Yeah.
You?
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. You're our current reigning champion?
I mean, in fairness, I usually am.
I know. It was a good guess. Matt is our current reigning champion, and we'll see if he gets dethroned by
Me.
By you.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Well, there we go. All right.
We'll
so
switch
the
seats.
three of us will be back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.